Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the Healthy Christian Leader. I'm Dwight Habermehl, and I have our guest today, Rob Laidlaw. Rob, it's great to have you here in the program, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today because we're going to be talking about being made in the image of God and what that means.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks, Dwight, for having me. And yeah, I love this topic, and it's something that is really foundational to pretty much everything else that I believe and follow.
Well, let's start off with probably the most fundamental question. What does it mean to be made in the image of God?
Well, it's interesting that declaration that we're made in the image of God is the very first statement about our identity in the Bible. And a lot of times people sort of wonder, well, when it comes to the image of God, what does that refer to? And they'll think, well, I think his character and his love or his creativity. And I think those things are all true, but it's not really the main focus of being made in the image. So if you want to understand the image of God, you've got to look at the context that those few verses are in. So if I open up my Bible to Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 on, it says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.'" And then it says, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. And God blessed them and said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over every living thing that moves on the earth.'" So this discussion about the image of God is smack dab in the middle of a broader discussion about who's going to rule the earth. So God creates this incredible, beautiful creation in the first two chapters of Genesis. But when he's finished doing the 7 days or 6 days of creation, he says, now, I need to put someone on the earth who's going to care for the earth on my behalf. And so he creates mankind, male and female, and says, your job now is to rule. And so this whole context of rule is what image is really all about. And there were some kings that were a little bit later on in history. They adopted this term, made in the image and in the likeness. And so they would make a statue of themselves and they would stamp on it, "This is in the image and the likeness of King so-and-so." For instance, there was one ruler, Hadad Yissi, and his statue was found. And it had this inscription on it, "Made in the image and the likeness of Hadad Yissi." And really what it is these statues would be put up in another land. And so even when the king wasn't present, every time someone walked by and they saw this image, they'd realize the king still ruled there in place. This image was just a reminder that the king still ruled in that land. And so they would never then think of sort of breaking away or being disobedient or rebellious, because they would realize the king rules here, I need to live under the king's rule. So when God says he's making us as his image, he's basically saying, I'm making you my representative ruler on the earth to care for the world on my behalf, to exercise my rule on my behalf. And so, so it's kind of an incredible role of significance and status that he's given us right from the beginning of creation.
Well, and it's interesting because God actually puts that in the desire for this in the heart of man, I would think, because we so often are trying to find our identity, trying to find who we are, and we anchor ourselves in that identity. And when we don't know Christ, but we can anchor it in a whole pile of places, from work to to status, to all kinds of different things.
Yeah, and we'll have to get more into why is that? Why are we searching? But there is something in us that says, I should be something greater than what I am, and I need to keep striving after that. Well, Adam and Eve wouldn't have had that problem in the garden. They would have understood, I have been given incredible significance. God has entrusted all of creation into my care, and I'm to rule this world on his behalf, for him. And so all the creation should know, because Adam and Eve were there, that God reigns and God rules, because that would be being expressed through them.
Oh, very interesting. So in what way were we to rule the earth.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Like if God created a perfect creation, then why does it need ruling? But especially like when it says, part of the role here, it says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Why does a perfect creation need subduing? Mm-hmm. And that's where then you look at saying, well, what's the whole point of the Garden of Eden? Like, why did God create a garden and place them? Why didn't he just place them on the earth? And I think what he's doing here, he's saying, I've created this incredible earth and it is perfect, mm-hmm. but it's not tamed. It's this beautiful wild chaos, but the Garden of Eden says, no, but here's what you can do. You can bring order now into the chaos. And you can now start organizing and arranging and maneuvering and planting trees here and moving things here and putting grass here. So Adam and Eve would have, they had this responsibility to multiply and fill the whole earth so that the whole earth could become a Garden of Eden.
Amazing.
It would have been a sort of a localized garden, mm-hmm. but now they're to spread out and turn the whole world into a beautiful, organized, orderly garden, essentially. So they would have had this authority, but the authority too would have been now over all the animals. So instead of just striving and working hard and being fearful, like they could tell the animals what to do and the animals would listen. They had that authority to rule. Do you remember Jesus said, if you have a faith the size of a grain of mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, be moved into the sea, mm-hmm. and it would happen. And it doesn't even say you have to pray to God to move the mountain. It says you can say to the mountain, be moved into the sea, and it would happen. He says, if you had just had faith the size of a grain of mustard seed, that could happen. Or you could say to this tree, be planted in the ocean, and it would happen. And we tend to think those are sort of extreme statements of Jesus, and no one really takes them seriously. Mm-hmm. But Adam and Eve would have had that type of faith in their initial relationship with God. Adam and Eve could say to the mountain, be moved into the sea, and it would have happened. So you understand when it says you get to subdue creation and you get to order it and you get to organize it, they had the authority to go with it and all the animal help and everything too, because it was just God's perfect plan.
So what happened at the fall? How was that interrupted? Because there must have been, there's an assignment and then there's a fall and there'd have to be an interruption in God's intent.
Yeah, so when Adam and Eve sinned against God, the Holy Spirit left their life, and when he left their life, so did the authority. Mm. They still had the same mandate. They still had to rule creation. They still had to care for it, but now the authority to do that is going to be a struggle. And like we'll talk more later on, but this whole idea of the curse was now that Adam was, instead of just enjoying caring for creation, now he's going to have to work and toil and sweat and weeds are going to grow up. And it's like even in my own yard, I can't even keep the dandelions down, let alone everything else. And the animals now are not going to be submissive. They're not going to listen. And in fact, they become a threat potentially. And so now it's going to be a fight for survival, and survival's not guaranteed. So this whole idea of representing God's rule got extremely hindered and limited because of the fall.
10 commandments say we're not to create an image of God. Why would that be?
Well, first and foremost, the reason we're not supposed to make an image of God is because God has already made an image.
Which is us.
It's us.
Yeah.
So why would I go and make an image of God when God says, no, Rob, you're the image, or Dwight, you're the image? What am I actually saying, first of all, about who God is by the image that I would create? Because the image that I might create of God might be a block of wood that's carved or a stone that's chiseled or whatever that image is that I create of God. But what is that actually really representing about God? How does that image him? Versus the type of image that God made. He made a walking, talking, breathing, living, growing, multiplying image that expresses his rule and authority, that can say to mountains, be moved into the sea, and it'll listen, and that we get to be creative and create beautiful masterpieces expressing the creativity of God. So like the type of image that God created is vastly superior to any image that I would create. And so any image that I would create of God is going to not display what God wants represented.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, if you make an image of God, what's that say about you, who you are? What's your identity?
Right.
What value and significance do you have?
It becomes lesser than.
Well,
than we are created to be.
Yeah, if I make an image of stone or wood, even if I overlay it with gold and jewels, but what's your role now then? Mm-hmm. If that's the image, who are you? And you are now less than that. And you now serve that. and so when you think about it now, then what is your significance? What is your purpose? If it's not to be God's image, then what purpose and significance do you have? See, when we understand we're the image of God, then that gives us incredible significance. You can't increase that significance. You can't even decrease it, because God has embedded into your identity. He has made you his image. Now, we might be a distorted image, but we are still his image, and we still have a purpose and a role to represent him, whether we know it or not. And so you think about it, why in this world is there a pandemic of low self-esteem?
Mm-hmm.
Wherever you go, in any culture, any time, people struggle with their sense of identity.
Mm-hmm.
Why? It doesn't make evolutionary sense. Evolution means we keep improving, better. But we just keep coming saying, no, I'm worse. Mm-hmm. And we have this incredibly low self-esteem that's like, I'm nothing. It's like I've done counseling with people and say, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, sort of rate your sense of self-worth, and -3 is a common answer, like 3, 4, and people just say, like, yeah, I don't think I've got much worth and value at all.
Mm.
But if you understood that you're the image of God, that you are his representative ruler, you're his ambassador, and everything God wants to accomplish, he wants to do through you. Well, would that give you a little bit more of a sense of significance? Mm. In fact, is there any role, any position, any status on earth that would be better than that?
Mm. No, it's amazing. And it actually gives a little bit of insight why we are prone, when our focus isn't in the right place, to the development of idols in our life, whether they're cars or houses, and the impact that makes on our life, because we end up serving them.
Yep.
And in bondage, serving to achieve this thing, when God's really given us a position of confidence and identity and rest in him, and rule over that which is around us.
When we don't understand that we're the image of God, and now we've got broken relationship with God, idols become the thing we chase after to give us life as we long for it, a life that we don't trust God is going to give us. So that's
good.
Really what an idol is anything you seek after, believing it will give you life that you don't trust God will provide. Yeah. And so then, anything can become an idol. It could become a relationship. It could be my finances. It could be my job status. Anything could become an idol if I believe it's giving me something that I don't trust God will give me. Now that's a little bit different than the image issue, because now, like, I will chase idols, though, when I have a distorted view of who God is, but because I'm actually chasing a different God. But even in my relationship with God, I can still downplay the fact that I'm his image, that I'm his representative, and I've got a job to fulfill and a purpose to fulfill, and that gives me significance. Apart from that, I'm going to start striving I'm going to need to find something that conveys significance to me, something that conveys worth to me, something that conveys value to me, because if I'm separated from the image of God, then where's all that coming from? And so, yeah, it really distorts our lives.
Well, it's interesting because when we start to see drivenness rising in our life and we're out of that position of rest, we can begin to see where the root causes are. As you know, it connects to that understanding of being made in the image of God,
Yeah.
along with a host of other things.
That's why I started off saying, like, being made in the image of God is really foundational to everything we understand about who we are and how we approach life in this world. Am I God's representative or am I not? If I'm not God's representative, what am I representing? And God would ultimately saying, hey, if you're not representing me, you're actually representing Satan's approach to life. You're representing Satan's values in this world. You're representing his character and ultimately his rule. And that's why when Jesus comes on the scene, he's proclaiming the kingdom of God is here. You can actually leave that kingdom life and you can enter into this kingdom life. And this kingdom life, you get to be restored back to being what I create you to be as my image. And you get to be my representative rulers again. And I mean, the whole point of the book of Revelation is that it ends with, and we will reign with Christ. We get restored back to this image role on the new earth.
Rob, you know, it really is amazing because what you're talking about is the path to finding rest and peace and confidence in this life, and moving from the victim and the have-not and the desire, the desiring, to the one who is fully loved,
Yes.
fully valued, fully confident, and reigning.
Well, and I'll say that precisely to my own church people, saying, God didn't create you to be a victim. He created you to be a ruler. You either approach life one of two ways. You approach it as a woe is me victim of here's what this world's doing to me and here's where I'm at and I don't have this and I don't have that. And we approach life as victims, constantly striving after life in some direction. And but what God is saying, I didn't create you to be a victim. In fact, you never have to worry about your provisions, and I'll take care of that if you seek me first, if you represent me first, seek first my kingdom and righteousness, then you don't have to worry about any of that. I'll take care of all that. You stand up, be bold, and represent me and my purposes and my character in this world. And yet how many of us go through our day thinking, today, I'm going to be God's representative ruler. And our heads held up high. We have that sense of boldness and that confidence. And, that's, I think we easily slip into, I just have to survive this week. Yeah.
How does our identity, rooted in the image of God, affect our relationships?
Well, so it's one thing to understand that you're the image of God. So first of all, if I understand I'm the image of God, then I need to understand I'm a 10 out of a 10 in God's perspective. Like as far as my worth and my significance, my value, purpose, 10 out of 10. Anything in how I view myself as less than a 10 out of 10, I'm actually diminishing the purpose and the value that God has placed on me. So now if that's true of me, then if I can shift gears and start viewing myself as not arrogantly, but just confidently that I am what God created me to be, and that's all I need to be. I don't need to be anything more, anything less. I'm just here to do what God calls me to do, and I just need to do that faithfully. Now, if I start doing that, that puts me on different groundings as far as what I'm striving after and my reactions to people. But it also then changes how I view other people. Because if everyone is created in the image of God, then Dwight, you too are the image of God. And now, am I treating you as if you're the image of God?
Yeah, right.
So if you're the image of God, God's representative, like if an angel came down, boom, in this room and just said, hey, I'm here to represent God's message and purpose, We would be in awe. We want to serve. We would listen. We would honor. And in fact, there's times when some of the apostles, like John and others, would just start worshiping the angel, and the angel is, no, stop doing that to me. I'm just another created being like you. But they understood that when someone has that identity and that role and that purpose, that we want to serve that. Mm-hmm. And so the question is that how I'm viewing you? Mm-hmm. Now, what happens when someone doesn't act like the image of God?
Yeah.
They don't know they're the image of God, and they don't act like the image of God. Does that affect how I'm supposed to relate to them? Well, no. I am responsible to treat you as the image of God, whether you act like it or not.
Yeah, because that was the intention of God in that person's life.
Now, he'll hold you accountable for whether you're representing him well. We're all going to stand before God saying, God, here's how I represented your rule. Mm-hmm. And man, that's going to be a terrifying time for people. Mm-hmm. But whether you act like the image of God is not my issue. That's between you and God. But I am still supposed to respect you. Paul and Peter both argued with regard to the government that we are to respect and honor and obey the government, as long as they're not calling us to do something anti-biblical. But for the most of the part, we are to honor and respect the government. And that means we don't speak actually negatively against our government. It doesn't mean we agree with them, because who was the government at the time of Paul and Peter? Yeah. Well, in the later stages, that would have been Nero, who was burning Christians in his gardens and who he blamed for the burning of Rome, and persecution just went widespread against Christians. It's this government, Nero, who is also identified as the beast in the book of Revelation. I mean, because the number 666 is the numerical value of Caesar Nero. So Nero is described as this ultimate anti-Christian beastly government, and yet Paul and Peter still saying, yeah, but you're still supposed to respect the government. Is that because you agree with their behavior and their character? Do you respect their character and behavior? No. But you understand that the position that they're in is a God-designed position of caring for creation and caring. And now, whether they do that on God's behalf, He will hold them accountable for that. But we are still to respect them. So if that's not just true for government, it's true for any positions of authority, but it's also true for every individual. Like, for instance, what are the two greatest commands?
Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself.
And what does he say about the love your neighbor yourself? He says, it is like the first command.
Right.
The second command is like the first command. Well, in what way is loving your neighbor like loving God? Well, because if your neighbor is God's representative,
yes.
So think about this way: if an ambassador of a country's in another country, and that country slaps the ambassador in the face, if we use Canada as an example, if the ambassador to Canada is in another nation and that nation slaps the ambassador of Canada in the face, what have they done to Canada?
Yeah, insulted.
They've slapped Canada in the face. If they killed the ambassador of Canada, what have they done to Canada?
Well, they've wounded them. and insulted them.
They've essentially declared war, right? When you kill what the representation of that country, you're essentially saying, I want to kill the country. Because how you treat the representative is how you treat what it represents.
Now, it's so good. Can we talk about how, we anchor ourselves and our mind and our thoughts in the reality that we are created in the image of God and that this is the position we hold? How does that transformation actually happen? Because, I bet you there's a lot of people saying, yeah, this sounds really, really good, but what is my journey that I need to take so that I can truly embrace this?
Well, one of the challenges is understanding, one, that the image has been distorted in us. Mm-hmm. And so really the question is, how do I get back to being the image that God created me to be and to live that out? And I think we're going to have to spend a whole session just tackling that.
Oh, so in other words, you need to come back to the next session of the Healthy Christian Leader that we'll be doing in another week. And we will carry the conversation on. That's so good, Rob. Thank you for coming into the program today. And we'll see you next time on the Healthy Christian Leader. Well, today's conversation was fantastic, but we're not finished yet. We'll be back in the next video with the same guest with more discussion about leader health. You know the drill. Subscribe and hit that bell. Would you join us for the next episode? You can find new episodes every week in video form on the Aaron Ministry YouTube page and in audio form as the Healthy Christian Leader Show wherever you get your podcasts. Aaron Ministries is an interdenominational network of friends in ministry with a mission to foster healthy Christian leaders. Check out our website, aaronministries.com, for more resources and information on how to donate or to start a healthy Christian leader gathering in your area. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.